Hello, I am Jack Grady, and on behalf of the Archives and History Committee of the First Baptist Church on the Square in LaGrange, Georgia, we welcome World War II veteran Guy Longshore, and we thank him for his service to our country and to our church. Guy, we are appreciative of your sharing with us this morning some of your experiences in World War II. I know there were many, but we want you to just kind of reflect with us this morning and give us some of your fine memories of that experience. Why don't we start by you telling us a bit about your enlistment process?
Well,
were you drafted? Or
I was drafted in Fort McPherson, Atlanta, Georgia. Spent about 3 nights there, and then they put me on a train and sent me to Miami Beach, Florida for basic training.
When was this?
Oh, gosh, I can't remember. It was in the wintertime, I remember that. But it's so nice to go
early in the war years.
Yeah, it was nice to go to Miami in the wintertime. Yeah. And the basic training consisted of marching up and down the golf courses down there and being on KP for 4 weeks. They did everybody that. You had 4 weeks with KP, and then you never had it again.
Yeah, okay. Sounds familiar. This must have been around 1943.
It was in January, February of 43, I believe, now that you mentioned it.
You know, that's interesting. We're sitting here talking about things that happened almost 70 years ago. And it is good, though, I think, for us to reflect and share these thoughts and comments and your experiences with people who know you now and people in the future who will be viewing this interview, I hope, from our heritage room here in the church. Well, Guy, tell us what branch of service and a little bit about your basic training.
They said I had a choice of the Army, Navy, or Marines, and I asked for the Army Air Force, which was Army Air Corps back then.
That's what it was called, wasn't it?
And so when I went to Miami, I thought, sure, they were going to send me somewhere to learn how to fly. But they put me on another train and sent me up to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, put me out there digging ditches, building runways. And I said, I don't think I'm going to like this the rest of my life. It was good work. I enjoyed being outside. So I went to see my captain, and I said, I want to be a pilot. And I said, can you do anything for me? So he sent me to Richmond, Virginia, and they gave me another basic training there and a psychiatric test to see whether I was qualified. So from there, they sent me to Penn State College.
Penn State,
which was the most beautiful place I think I've ever been. And it snowed a little bit every day up there, and it was just wonderful. That was part of my training.
About how long did that last?
Oh, we were there about 3 or 4 months, I guess.
That long?
And we had to have 10 hours flying in a Piper Cub. And it seemed like my bad luck. Every day was my day to fly. It snowed.
Oh.
And trying to learn how to fly an airplane in the snow. I was scared anyway. So. But then from there we went to, forgot where we went now, Jack. From Penn State, went to Maxwell Field.
Maxwell
Field, that's
Montgomery,
right.
Alabama.
Montgomery, Alabama. Yeah. And then from there I went over to Bennettsville, South Carolina, learned how to fly a Stearman PT-17. And that's why I cracked up the airplane a little bit. On the landing, I sort of steered off the runway a little and went through a grove of trees. So they said 3 days later I was on a train going to Denver, Colorado to learn to be a gunner on B-29s.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that was quite a change.
Yeah, sure. But getting back to your basic training experience, what would you say was one of your most challenging chores that you had to do, or
the hardest thing to get used to?
Yeah, I guess so.
Sleeping in a room with 20 or 30 other people. That was the hardest thing to get used to, is not having any privacy.
But learning to fly a plane also was a challenge,
well,
I'm sure.
I thought I was doing pretty good on the airplane, even though I got sick every time I flew. But the last check ride, I misjudged the distance and went off in a grove of trees. So they very quickly put me on the train.
Well, you just mentioned that they sent you out west and you were reassigned. What essentially were your duties at that point?
Well, they sent me to gunnery school out in Denver, Colorado for the remote control gunnery system on B-29 aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, they sent us to gunnery school down in Fort Myers, Florida. And from there to Lincoln, Nebraska.
Wow.
And from there to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I joined a crew. And that was where it all began, as being a command gunner on the B-29.
Command gunner.
Command gunner. That means up in the top.
Okay.
The top gunner.
The top turret?
I had turned on all the controls for the other guns.
Okay. All right. So your duties included not only your own, but you had some relationship and responsibilities to your other crew members.
Well, we all had little duties. Certain ones had to turn on the putt-putt. It was auxiliary power when you got on the airplane. And I think the tail gunner did that most of the time. And you had to turn it off when we got off the plane. Mm-hmm. But then my position was to make sure we looked at the engines and make sure they were not leaking oil. Mm-hmm. Something to call the pilot and tell him if we saw flames coming out or saw oil leaking. And then he would take care of it. Okay.
Did you leave that base then and go to the South Pacific?
We left there and we made one stop in Hawaii because my pilot had an earache. So we had to stay there 3 days to get over that. Then we went to Kwajalein. He still had the earache, so we spent 3 more days of vacation on the island of Kwajalein. Then from there we went to Guam, stayed in Guam a couple of weeks, turned in our brand new airplane. They gave us an old beat-up airplane. It had been there a long time. We flew that over to Saipan, and that was our missions from Saipan. All our main flying was from Saipan.
From Saipan.
Yeah.
Okay. And what were your missions?
Primarily, we were dropping bombs, the heavy bombs. Then they changed the way of doing it. They started dropping fire bombs.
In Japan, I
On
presume.
Japan. They found out we're not doing too much damage with the heavy bombs. Mm-hmm. So they said we're going to go in at night at 5,000 feet and drop fire bombs. So that's what really did the damage.
Did you make a number of runs?
Yeah, we made a number of runs.
Tokyo?
And we always had to stop at Iwo on the way back because you couldn't carry enough fuel to make the runs and get back to Saipan. It was about a 12-hour flight, Jack, up there and back, but not always 12 hours because of the winds. Sometimes it's 13 or 14-hour flight because of the air. And so you'd be up there 12 hours in an airplane, you're pretty tired out.
Oh, I can imagine.
So we would stop at Iwo and spend the night. We'd sleep in the airplane, had nothing to eat. We had no breakfast that day or no lunch. We'd sleep in the airplane that night, get up the next morning, get up on the wing of the airplane, wait for the trucks to bring you some gasoline so you could fill up the plane and fly back to Saipan. You get home after dark. The mess hall's closed, so you've been about 3 days without anything to eat. So that was the worst part.
Oh, my goodness.
Everything. I lived off of candy bars.
Well, I was just going to ask you if you didn't have some snacks in your pocket.
No, I had big pockets in my flight suit. I'd buy candy bars at the PX and eat those.
I can imagine.
But that was exciting.
You mentioned Iwo. You're talking about Iwo Jima?
Iwo Jima.
So you came back, on your way back, you stopped at an air base there.
Well, sometimes
just an airstrip.
Well, Iwo Jima is just 8 square miles, Jack, and people don't realize how small it is.
Yes.
Sometimes we'd have 100 airplanes there one night, and you lined up nose to tail, and then but you couldn't leave the next morning until you had gas. And the thing is, everybody wanted to leave early because we want to get back to Saipan before dark.
Of course.
Because you don't want to be landing at dark after dark.
Sure.
So it was exciting.
Now this would have been like what, 1944?
45 now.
45. You're up to 45.
45.
All right.
And then I remember right after that. Let's see, when was the surrender signed?
It was in
March. No. September, wasn't it?
September.
Yeah.
August. The bombs were dropped in August.
Right.
So the surrender ceremony would have been...
August the 6th, I was on Saipan, and we had not flown for 2 or 3 days, so we knew something was up. We were thinking maybe the invasion was coming, because we'd gotten in some new airplanes, they'd brought in some new fighters, so all of us were talking about the invasion. So after about 3 days, everything was so quiet. One morning, about 2:30 in the morning, I walked down to the edge of the cliff and looked over to Tinian, which is 20 miles away.
Tinian.
Tinian. And we saw this one B-29 take off.
Yes.
And I didn't know at the time, but that was the Enola Gay.
Enola Gay.
It took off and made a right turn, headed straight to Japan. But 5 other airplanes had taken off earlier that morning, but I didn't see them. I just saw the Enola Gay take off. So then we still didn't know what it was till another day. I went up to the control towers and asked them. They told me that's what it was. So that was exciting to know
I can imagine.
that the war was going to be over.
Sure.
And then I think I told you before about when they signed the surrender, they had 1,500 American airplanes flying over Tokyo Bay while the surrender was being signed on the deck of the Missouri.
What a scene that must have been.
It was 1,300 Navy planes and 200 B-29s.
Wow.
And I think about that sometimes now, how dangerous it was, Jack, because we were flying so close together.
200 B-29s.
229s in the formation. I was sitting up there looking out. I could see a B-29 on the end of this wing, on the end of this wing, one right above us,
Wow.
and one right behind. We were all bouncing along like that. And think about it now.
Yes.
If one plane had gotten out of formation, we could have all crashed.
Oh, man.
It's just, now it's kind of scary to think about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Just a miracle almost.
It really is.
Yeah, right.
But we put on a big show. I think the Japanese saw why we won the war.
Yes, of course. Well, quite a story, Guy. But you did some other things from the air while you were flying over Japan. Tell me about those prisoner of war
Oh,
camps.
yeah. After the surrender, we brought over all the airplanes from Tinian and Guam, lined them all up on the runway in Saipan. I counted that day. There were 200 airplanes lined up, and we loaded them up with supplies. They take these big 55-gallon tanks, gasoline cans, fill them up with food and jackets and clothing and everything, and makeshift parachutes on them. We dropped those in prisoner of war camps in Japan and China. One time we dropped in Shanghai, but our first one was Sakata in Japan. And Jack, that was kind of scary because B-29 is supposed to fly at 30,000 feet.
Yes.
We went in just right above the treetops. We passed through this little town, and we saw a P and a W painted on the roof of the house.
Yes.
So we turned around, we came back down, we made another pass over it to make sure it was still there. So on the third pass, then we dropped the supplies.
PW, prisoner
of war. But we were so low that I could see the curtains in the windows of the houses.
Wow.
And on one time, the streetcar stopped, and everybody got off the streetcar and lay down in the ditch because they were so scared. They'd never seen a B-29 that low
Yeah, I guess so.
because we'd always been just a little speck in the
Sure.
sky.
And this was right after?
This was right after the surrender was, 2 weeks after the surrender was signed.
2 weeks after the surrender.
Yeah. So it was kind of exciting
Oh, sure.
for a 19-year-old kid, to see all that, look down and see all that.
Of course it was.
Because I took pictures of it. Because
Well, now I want you to tell me just a little bit about your pictures.
Well, I had a little $12 camera I took with me.
A Brownie?
No, it was an Argus.
Argus camera.
$12 camera. I had that with me. Had one roll of color film, and I used that up pretty quick. But I have never thought that their pictures would be worth anything when I took them. It was just for my benefit.
Yes.
But I think I've told you when I came home, in the past 2 or 3 years, the Smithsonian liked the pictures so well, they asked for the negatives. And they put them on the website.
The
Smithsonian Air and Space Magazine has put them on the website. And just this past 2 weeks ago, they called me and wrote me and told me they put the prisoner of war pictures on the web now.
Wow.
So anybody can tune in and find them on the website.
That is amazing.
It's just amazing from a little $12 camera.
Yes. And, as you think about it, you put your life into action during this period of time in our history. But now, almost 70 years later, maybe 70 years later, you are reaping some of the dividends of that experience.
Well,
and they continue, don't they?
Yeah, I'm no hero, I know that, but I just enjoy the fact that people can see the pictures.
Well, yes,
and enjoy
of
them.
course.
Because they never would have been shown if they. I don't know why people just didn't. Well, we didn't have cameras back then. Everybody didn't have a camera like you do now.
Yes.
In fact, some of the fellows would borrow my camera sometimes.
Yeah.
They'd buy a roll of film, didn't have a camera, so they'd borrow my camera. So I keep in touch with a lot of these fellows still, which is great too.
Oh, it is.
Made some great friendships.
Oh, sure. You have a network of friends, I'm sure.
And one other thing, if I may put
please
this
do.
in. I guess it was 2 weeks after the war was over, we flew a weather mission up over Vladivostok, Russia.
Oh,
And on the way back, we were running low on fuel, and one engine was out. So the pilot asked for permission to make an emergency landing in Japan. That none other B-29 had ever landed in Japan. So they gave us permission to land at Atsugi Air Base, which is near Yokohama, which is below Tokyo.
oh yes.
Well, it was a Japanese naval base.
I was in Yokohama right after the war.
You know where it is, exactly. So we landed on this one little airstrip there. Well, they had some mechanics there since the Army had come in. We were the third American airplane to land after the surrender.
The third plane.
Third one. And so the Army had already come in. MacArthur had brought the Army in, and they came, had truck drivers there and mechanics. So they worked on our airplane for us. But they said it would take 2 or 3 weeks to get it, 2 or 3 days, to get it fixed. So we went over and found a little train that took us into Yokohama, then got on another train that took us to Tokyo. So the 11 of us walking down the streets, we didn't know what to do, but everybody got off the street. We walked down the street, they'd get out of our way completely. Oh, yeah. And we went to the Imperial Hotel, built by Frank Lloyd Wright. We went in, and every bit of the furniture was gone. We found the Army was setting up a, mess hall down in the basement of the hotel.
Yes.
So we could get something to eat. And they said, well, where can we sleep? They said, go upstairs, take any room you want. So we went up, picked out the nicest looking rooms, but there was no furniture, no soap, no towels. We couldn't take a bath.
No bed?
Oh, no beds. We just slept on the floor, and we went downstairs and got something to eat. We just walked around Tokyo for 3 days, and finally went back to Atsugi, and they had our airplane ready.
Yes.
So we could come home.
Well, what an experience.
But that wasn't the end of it, though, Jack. On the way home from Atsugi, they could give us just a certain amount of fuel because we had to take off from a little short runway.
Oh.
So they wouldn't give us a full load of fuel. So we had just enough to get to Iwo. Well, we took off. About halfway to Iwo, the engine started going out again.
Oh.
And the radar went out. The pilot said, wait a minute. Said, it's dark. He said, I'm not going to ditch at night because at night you can't see the waves.
Yeah.
And you could come in and ditch at the wrong angle and the plane could tilt over.
I see.
He said, you're going to have to bail out. So we told us, everybody put on your parachutes. So they opened the bomb bay doors. We were all lined up, ready to bail out. I was the first one in line and back. They were all going to push me out. I wasn't going to jump. They were going to push me. So then that time, the pilot came on and said, I see it. Said, I can see some lights on the top of the ships in the harbor at Iwo. Said, we're going to land at Iwo. So we closed the bomb bay doors. We went ahead and landed.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was kind of scary. That was really one of the most scary places I've ever been.
I can imagine.
So
sure.
We thought we were home safe, but then not quite.
Have you ever considered writing your memoirs?
I have, Jack, and you brought that up. Air and Space, in the letter they sent me the other day, they're publishing part of my memoirs.
Oh, good.
They're on the internet.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So anybody wants to see it, they can go in, put Google and put Guy Longshore, and they can see part of this.
How about that?
I'm not bragging on it.
Yeah, well,
it's just the fact that.
Again, this is another one of those dividends.
Well, it's just something I wrote down what I saw. That's all I did. I wasn't a celebrity or a hero. I just wrote down what I saw.
Yeah, and that's worthwhile now.
I hope it is.
Not only to you, but to the rest of us.
Well, I hope somebody will see it and enjoy it.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Maybe I'll get a little more respect in LaGrange, maybe.
Guy. Well, Guy, you have any other thoughts or any other experiences you'd like to share?
I'm just happy to be here in LaGrange and in the First Baptist Church among you and all my friends.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. And we are happy that you are here. And
thank you for the...
And we appreciate so much you sharing your...
Thank you for doing this.
Your experiences. We also want to thank Paul Barnes, who is I call him our technical advisor. He's doing the actual recording of this interview. And Paul will complete this, and we'll place a copy of the interview in the Heritage Room and it will be maintained by our Archives and History Committee for future use. Whoever wants to come and visit and see these most interesting videos that are on file there. And we also will give you a copy for your
Thank you, Jack.
For your
Appreciate
enjoyment. And we thank you so much for your willingness to come and sit with us and do this.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Best wishes to you.
Thank you for your friendship.
Yes, sir. Thank you.